just a trainee.
And she may be the head of the house.
All right, welcome, everyone. We're going to shut that beautiful score up. Welcome, everyone, to From Austen to Austenland, the evolution of the Regency romance. That was very civil. Thank you. So, before we begin, you might be wondering, what brought you here? And we're not going to get super existential, but we will talk about what exactly you're going to do now that you are here. So this evening will be divided up into 3 primary parts. The first will be this presentation. Fortunately, it's the dullest part, so we're getting that out of the way first. Then we will have some time for questions and also to see some of the books that we have here from our collection. And then after, the festivities shall begin, and you will be whirled away into a night of elegance. Okay. Anyway, and a word about the presentation. This is 200 years of history. Unfortunately, I can't keep you here for months on end, so we won't be able to get to everything. We'll make some omissions. We'll keep pretty surface level for the rest of it. That said, if there is anything that you want to touch on that you feel is worth touching on a little bit more, or that we didn't get to at all, or that you're more curious about, again, there will be time for questions at the end. Feel free to raise your hand at any time, though, with a word of warning that I am so good at derailing myself that if I have extra help, we might need the full team to pull us back in. But there will be time for questions at the end, and also if you'd just like to talk after the presentation, that is fine as well. Okay, and without further ado, let us begin. Well, no one can see this arm. That would cause scandal. Okay. I'm actually going to take both of these off, and I will tell you why. Not because I wish to court scandal, but because, fun fact, when you are handling old books like this, it's best not to wear gloves for several reasons. That's not a part of the presentation, though, so we're going to skip over that. Anyway, here we are at the beginning, and what better place to begin than a blank slide? So you might be wondering, okay, so what exactly is this presentation going to look like? And that's very kind if you are. Well, there are 2 main questions that I'd like to address this evening. The first, of course, is how did we get from here, you know, novels of marriage plots being written actually in the Regency period, to here, which is a kind of kitschy, meta, on-screen version 200 years removed. In other words, how do we get from Austen, point A, to Bridgerton, point B? Laugh in moderation, please. Don't break the rules of civility. So that's the first question, how do we get from Austen to Austenland, Austen to Bridgerton? But the second question is, why the Regency at all? What is it that, no matter how many changes are made between these 2 periods, why do we keep coming back to the Regency, or at least a Regency-inspired setting? So have those 2 rolling in your head as we go along, and if I don't end up answering either of them, forget it. This slide never happened. But you might be saying, oh, but Charity, my name is Charity, by the way, I'm the book curator here at Artifacts of History. You might be saying, Charity, book curator at Artifacts of History, how are we to get from point A to point B? That's 200 years. How are we going to do that in such haste and comfort and convenience as to pack it all into one night? And I'm glad you asked, because can you hear that? Does my ears deceive me? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a carriage. This is not the Bridgerton carriage, though, so please keep your hands to yourself. Okay. Now, if we're going to talk about the development of the Regency from the Regency, then what better place to start than the Regency itself? Welcome, dearest gentle readers, to the Regency era. You've made it. All right. Of course, it is worth addressing what is the Regency. When we're talking about the Regency period, what does that mean? Technically, it is a 9-year period spanning 1811 to 1820. The monarch at the time of England, King George III, battled with mental and physical illness all his life. But it was only in 1811 that he was declared unsuitable or unfit to rule, and his son, George, the Prince of Wales, stepped in as the Prince Regent, the kind of substitute king, until George III died in 1820, and the Prince Regent ascended as the official King George IV. So while it is only a very brief span of time, technically, when we think Regency era, it has a little more leeway. Think anything from 1800-ish to about 1832. Now, of course, when you are thinking about the Regency era, which I hope is always, images such as this might come to mind. People being elegant and wealthy and going to balls every other day, and when they're not at balls, they're gossiping over tea and exchanging witty conversation. And while that was the case for a select few of the population, this was actually a time of enormous disparity between classes. It's much, much bigger than that. I think the Regency is such a critical time in so many ways. It's kind of this point where the English world, the Western world, is on the brink of modernity. So much is about to change. What I say, and what I mean when I say that, is the industrial age is just about to take off. Fashions are changing. People are dressing in ways that we would recognize more as modern day people. Europe itself is changing politically. In the 1790s, the French Revolution happens. After that, the Napoleonic Wars happen, and so the actual political borders, political power is changing in Europe. During this time, literature is changing astronomically. In 1798, we have Samuel Taylor Coleridge and my boy William Wordsworth publishing lyrical ballads, which changes the course of poetry forever. You have Jane Austen, who's really reinventing and revolutionizing the novel. So literature is changing the way people think. It's changing. Love is becoming a higher priority, a more normal priority in marriages. And of course, all this is kind of generalizations and simplifications, so it is more complex than that. But abolition is another thing. Abolition is about to really take off, or really happen. Take off is too trite a phrase, I think, for that. But abolition is really making a lot of headway in England during this time. So you see, it's this age that's on the precipice of what we'd consider modernity. Of course, when we read Jane Austen novels, though, that's not always what we're getting, at least not explicitly. Of course, we have retrospect, and that always helps our case, but it was notable even then how little attention Jane Austen seemed to pay to the enormity of her age. And she was aware of things that were going on. Her cousin's husband was beheaded in the French Revolution. Super fun fact. So she was aware. She had brothers in the Navy, but her main focus, consistently and notably, even at the time she was publishing, was the kind of minutiae of everyday life. This is a review from 1816 for Jane Austen's 1815 novel, Emma, where the reviewer, and I know it might be kind of hard to see in the back, but he notes that this anonymous authoress is remarkable in her capacity to draw with such fine, precise detail the nuances of everyday life. This reviewer, of course, was a man called Sir Walter Scott, who was a poet and a novelist, one of the biggest novelists of the 19th century, actually, and a contemporary of Jane Austen. And about 10 years after she died, he wrote in his own private journal, again, just how blown away he was by her capacity to draw the everyday so beautifully, so interestingly, to take the mundane and make it into something special. He says that she has this talent for describing involvements and feelings of ordinary life, which to me is the most wonderful ever met with. So what I really want to emphasize here with this point is that the version of the Regency that exists in the Regency, in Regency fiction, it's just the everyday. And it's remarkable in that there's no sheen of retrospective romanticism quite yet. This is just how people of the middle class were living their lives. And of course, we're going to talk about Jane Austen over and over and over again, so I do hope you like her in this presentation. But I do want to put in a little plug for Sir Walter Scott. In the next sentence, he talks about, kind of in this self-deprecating way, the big bow wow strain that he excels at writing. And what he means by that are these sweeping historical sagas that, again, Jane Austen isn't writing. And she's very important in the development of the Regency romance because she's writing some of the very first, romances set in the Regency. Want to just make sure that is driven home. But we can't have the Regency romance without the historical novel, because after the Regency passes, any fiction that is set in the Regency is now historical. And Sir Walter Scott essentially invents historical fiction. We have actually one of his novels. He had a whole slew of them. They're referred now as the Waverley novels. This is one of them, a volume of one of the novels in its original boards. So this is how it actually would have appeared in bookshops in I don't remember the year of this, 19 maybe? Don't quote me on that. And then this is a rebound edition, which would have been done sometime probably in the 19th century. Yes?
Is that Waverley or is that one of the other?
So this is not Waverley, this is just one of the successive Waverley novels. This is The Landlord, Tales of My Landlord, which I think was his last Waverley novel. So yes, Walter Scott, great. Love that guy. Moving on. Another contemporary of Austen who noted how well Austen was at creating believable characters and believable settings. Annabella Milbank, in a letter to her mother, again writes about how this writer is able to just draw from everyday life. It's extraordinary. It's astounding. And yes, again, this is a point that I really want to drive home. But the point that I really, really, really want to drive home is what she says at the very end, about that Mr. Darcy. There's just something about that guy, which I think is so great. Another novelist. Oh, by the way, Annabella Milbank married Lord Byron, so she's into Darcy. Anyway, another novelist at the time, Mary Russell Mitford. Her favorite thing, shockingly, about Pride and Prejudice was also Mr. Darcy. Couldn't get enough of that guy. Still can't. And so, I mean, this is kind of fun. It's kind of fun to see what people were noticing about these novels. But I also think it's just so fun that this Darcy-like fanaticism has been strong since day one. I love that so much. So what Jane Austen is doing for the Regency romance, obviously, is kind of inventing it. But she's also giving us the stock, the type for the modern romantic hero, and that is Darcy, someone who's a little broody and a little sensitive, and because of that he's a little bit sexy. And so while she's developing the hero, though, of course, she is making revolutionary touches on the heroine. This is a review of Pride and Prejudice, the year it came out. And what I love about this is that they look at the heroine, Elizabeth Bennet, and they say, her conduct, her sense, her sense and conduct are just so much better than what you see in other novels. It's amazing. In other words, Elizabeth Bennet just is not like other girls. And this is something that you'll see again and again and again and again and again and again, etc., in the romance genre for the rest of time. Now, let us say goodbye to the Regency. Goodbye, Regency. That was so weak. Anyway, and embark now into the Victorian era. Welcome, my friends, to the Victorian era. Yay! All right.
Everyone cover your ankles.
Oh yes, please. I can't have that. Don't look at my socks. So I have a very important question for all of you, and that is important. And that is, what, pray, is this?
It's a demon water.
Yes, so close. So close. It's a silver fork, Charity. Ding, 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 ding. Well done. This is a silver fork. Why am I showing you a picture of a silver fork? Well, because the novels that immediately succeeded the Regency period, so the ones that were really popular from the 1820s to the 1840s, are called silver fork novels now, kind of derisively, also known as fashionable novels. And that is because William Hazlitt, the essayist, did not really like these very much. He thought they were just too much. I mean, they were all about rich people doing rich people things, such as eating fish with a silver fork. And he thought that that was inaccessible. He also thought that he just thought they were trashy. Trashy romance novels. Has anyone heard of those before? Anyway, so this, what Hazlitt is doing, turning a critical eye toward these late Regency or just post-Regency novels is really about the Regency, is really exemplary of what's going to continue on during the rest of the 19th century, and that is writers of Regency fiction looking on the period with an eye of criticism, but also a recognition that it is a very complex period of time. For instance, did you know that Jane Eyre is technically a Regency romance? What? Yes, it's set during the early 19th century and it has a romantic plot. Does it read very much like a Regency romance? Not really. Interestingly though, it's pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? The feeling that it invokes is actually pretty accurate to its setting. It's a very gothic novel, full of dilapidated buildings and brooding, messed up heroes and crazy, I won't spoil it for you. Anyway, if you haven't read it already though, anyway, so it's very, very gothic. And gothic novels were, as some of you may know, very popular toward the beginning of the Regency especially. We have authors like Anne Radcliffe and the guy who wrote The Monk, whose name also has monk in it. So while it doesn't read like what we'd expect a Regency novel to read like, it's actually pretty accurate in its way. Unfortunately, that is all I'm going to say about Jane Eyre, except a word about its dedication page for the 1850 edition. One of Charlotte Bronte's favorite novelists was a man called William Makepeace Thackeray. Jane Eyre was published in 1847, and from 1847 to 1848, Thackeray was working on his own novel set in the Regency period, which is Vanity Fair. And here it is in its first edition. It actually has one of the original wrappings for the serials. Vanity Fair, as you might guess from the title, also not super positive depiction of the Regency. What Thackeray does is he takes this expectation for the romantic novel and he completely upends it. There's a passage about a third of the way through the book where these two characters get married, and he stops you to go on a tangent, as Thackeray is wont to do, and says, in a novel that is like other girls, this is where it would end. The hero and the heroine would be married off, and we just rely on the fact that they're happy to the end of their days. You notice there are 2/3 left of this book, so that is not how it's going to go, and indeed it is not how it's going to go, how it ends up going. And one of the reasons for this is Thackeray's choosing the Regency as a setting allows him to focus on two great hallmarks of the Regency, and that is its lavish excess, its period of almost grotesque excess, and then also the Regency as a period of wartime. And this allows Thackeray to not shy away at all from a society that is politically, socially, emotionally, morally corrupt. Of course, he's making commentary on his own period, but by setting it in the Regency, which is just such an exaggerated version of gaudiness, he's able to really emphasize this point that he wants to make, that society is a vanity fair, full of vain, wicked, foolish people, false people with pretensions. So, does Thackeray really think the Regency is all that? Not really. This is also the case with a fellow you may have heard of. His name is Charles Dickens. He also writes a novel, Little Dorrit, which is set in the 1820s, so still kind of Regency period, where he critiques the time. But instead of focusing on the hypocrisy and the excesses of the wealthy, he instead focuses on the struggles of the working class. We actually have a full Little Dorrit in its original paper paper wrappings up here, which you're free to see when you come up, as well as an edition that has been rebound, a first edition rebound. So for these Victorians, these mid-Victorians especially, the Regency is not sunshine and roses. However, there are plenty during the Victorian era who do look back on it with rose-tinted glasses. Dickens is actually one of these. His very first novel, published in 1837, I think, The Pickwick Papers, is also set in the 1820s, but instead it focuses on a bunch of cute little bumbling provincial people doing pre-industrial things. And then as we move farther away from the Regency, we begin to see this increasing trend to look at it with even more intense rose-tinted glasses. In the case of some paintings, like very literally. In the 1890s and early 1900s, a lot of artists, especially Edmund Blair Leighton, some of whose paintings you see here, turns to the Regency as this very fun, beautiful, lush, romanticized, genteel time, ignoring all of the depravity that was also going on. And a lot of artists are doing this too. Leighton is probably the most famous one, although I think it's worth making a case for another artist whose name is Hugh Thompson. In 1891, he was a book illustrator, and in 1891 he was commissioned to do an illustrated version of Elizabeth Gaskell's Cranford, which, by the way, is one of my favorite novels ever, ever, ever. Please read it, I'll be your friend. And this is so successful that it's just the first at the beginning of a whole series of novels that Thompson illustrates. The most famous one being, of course, the Peacock edition of Pride and Prejudice from 1894. I have one of the copies here. It's gorgeous. Please get a chance to look at it. It has 160 illustrations on the inside, as well as the ornate peacock cover. If you've ever seen Pride and Prejudice merch that has peacock designs on it, it's because of that book. Nothing to do with the real novel. And there are a lot of really interesting things as well to say about this edition. But one thing that I want to focus on are the depictions that Thompson has of the Regency, especially in the way that he dresses his characters up. There are definite traces of actual Regency fashions. He did go to the V&A, the Victorian Albert Museum, and he did look at original Regency gowns and things to get inspiration. But it's also kind of a hybrid between actual Regency fashions and what was fashionable in the late Victorian era. So what he's doing is he's updating these characters to be more appealing to a modern audience. He's kind of marrying these two things together. Hold on to that fact, because we're going to come back to it later. Now, remember, we're in the 1890s. Just one more push, and we'll get into the 20th century, specifically the middle years. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the mid-20th century. Yay! Fun fact, if you were to tell a Regency lady, I want to hold your hand, you'd be exiled real fast. I do want to take a moment to enjoy this lovely classical Beatles cover, because it's about to get dark in a second, so just... That was enough, because in 1914 the Archduke Franz Ferdinand was shot. This was a catalyst for the beginning of World War I. Okay, welcome everyone to World War I. Yay. Now before we go on and talk about the influence of World War I on the Regency romance, I just want to see if anyone is interested in a brief aside about Jane Austen and her popularity in World War I. Raise your hand if that's interesting to you. Perfect, yay. Okay, so Jane Austen, fun fact, was really quite popular, especially for English soldiers during the First World War. This is for two main reasons. One is that because she's writing such, contained, domestic, genteel novels that don't make a lot of explicit references to the wars that are actually going on, she's the perfect route of escapism for these soldiers who are suffering in the trenches. I mean, there's nothing more different than suffering from the shocks of war and trench fever and all of those different things, and parlor room conversation. So she's really popular because of that, but she's also popular because she stands for a lot of these soldiers and what England is and what's worth defending. manor houses and beautiful landscapes and things like that. And Rudyard Kipling noticed, so popular was She in the Trenches, that in 1924, Rudyard Kipling wrote a book that was first published in a magazine and then published in 1926 in a short story collection, here, Debits and Credits, called The Janeites. And it's this weird little story about these guys who just get together and talk about how much they love that little spinster from Hampshire. One of the best bits of it is they've named the guns after characters in Jane Austen's novels, and not surprisingly, Miss Bates is the Gatling gun because it just anyway, back to our regularly scheduled program. So, World War I. It happens, and has an enormous effect on the historical novel, in the sense that it kind of makes the historical novel declare itself more firmly as what it is. Because now that the world, in a wartime world and a post-war world, it's been lunged into this age of ugly, mechanized, violent modernity. And so it becomes really clear which side of the war stories now fall on. Edith Wharton, one of my favorite novelists, talks about this, how you can no longer assume the present because the present is so different from all the presents that we've had before. So World War I, really, has a significant impact on historical novels. It also has a significant impact on the romantic novel, what scholars of this sort of thing refer to as the first modern romantic novel, is called The Shake. It was published in 1919, written by E.M. Home. And remember, World War I ends in November of 1918, but the Treaty of Versailles, which officially ends it, isn't until 1919. So this is right, we've just finished this worldwide massacre against each other. And one of the reasons why this becomes so popular is its characterization of the hero and the heroine. The hero, played by Rudolph Valentino here, look at the size of those biceps, embodies everything that women, especially at the time, felt like men no longer were. Because remember, the men who survived the war are now grappling with these really serious mental or physical disabilities and scars. And so, unfairly or fairly, a lot of women at the time feel that society has become emasculated. And so in comes this Sheikh who is, mentally, physically, emotionally, sexually, really healthy. And, but beside him comes this, sorry, my parents are here. anyway, but beside him is this heroine, whose name is either Diane or Diana, I can't remember. And she is classic spirited heroine who wants her own independence, and so these two have to work to tame each other. And so is born the modern romance novel, because those are the stocks that we're going to see for the rest of the century, at least. So we have World War I revolutionizing the historical novel, we have it revolutionizing the romantic novel, so all we need to do is put them together and we have the historical romance novel. Well done! And what better person to take on this task than Georgette Hare? She was not the only novelist who was writing historical romances, but she's so significant, and we'll get to why in just a moment. She writes her first historical romance in 1921. It's called The Black Moth, and it's set in the 18th century, so the century before the Regency starts. And, she does well, she's having a good time, and in 1935 she thinks, what would be a stellar setting for a historical romance novel? It's the Regency. And so she, in 1935, publishes Regency Buck, which becomes the first of 28 Regency romance novels that she writes until the end of her life. Have one of them here. You'll notice it's called Charity Girl. That's really cute and fun. Anyway, so Georgette Hare does a lot for the Regency romance genre, most notably establishing the Regency romance as a genre. The term Regency romance is only first used when people are reviewing Hare's novels. and significantly, the version of the Regency that she portrays is, I mean, it's very meticulously researched, but it's still inauthentic. She's still putting a bit of a 20th century edge on it. Her heroines look like 20th century heroines. Her heroes are not as misogynist as maybe they might have been if it had been actual Regency era. And so she gives the world not only the Regency romance as a genre, but what exactly that version of the Regency looks like. She is massively influenced by Jane Austen, though. She did say once that, if you had to have one author on a desert island, who would it be? And she said Jane Austen, and I said, that's my girl. But what happens is Hare's novels are so successful, the Regency romance genre is so successful, that other romance novelists take to it. These are a few examples of Hare's disciples. They're especially popular in the 50s, 60s, into the 70s. And of course, Regency romance novels are still popular reading today. But interestingly, these novels, are so popular, the Regency romance genre is so popular, that publishers start reissuing Jane Austen's novels with covers that look quite a lot like the contemporary Regency romance novels. Up until the mid-20th century, Jane Austen was read pretty indiscriminately by both men and women, but it's when we get into the middle of the 20th century that stuff like this happens, that Jane Austen's kind of pinkified, that she becomes officially chick lit and is now grouped in with the rest of the Regency romance novels. So what I think is just fascinating about this is we have Hare, who is influenced by Jane Austen, novelists who are influenced by Hare, and then those novels then influence how we perceive Jane Austen, and of course the Regency genre at large. Now, before we can get into the present day, we need to make a quick stop, and that, I'm so excited for this one, is the 90s. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, you made it to the 90s. And this is honestly the hardest part of this presentation because I don't want to go past this slide. This song is just such a spicy cover, ha 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 ha, that I just want to linger on it forever. But we can't, unfortunately. We have bigger fish to fry. In the 90s, we get this big Hollywood boom of Jane Austen adaptations. This begins because of the enormous success and popularity, both critically and commercially, of the 1995 miniseries Pride and Prejudice. Raise your hand if this is your favorite one. You all are my favorite people. And this is so successful that it spawns this whole slew, I've already used that word, this whole slew of Jane Austen film adaptations. Not excluding, of course, Emma, Clueless, which is a modern adaptation of Jane Austen's Emma. These films do, obviously, a lot for Jane Austen and also for the Regency romance and popular culture. One thing is that it brings the Regency more into the mainstream. More people are familiar with the Regency now as a genre. They're more familiar with what it looks like. It also adds or solidifies the conventions of the genre in a really accessible, visual way. You can now just see something and know that it's Regency, rather than sit down and read a book and learn that it is. But one of the biggest things that this does for the genre is the female gaze. This is me next to the shirt with my weird haircut, but that's not what we want to focus on. So what is the female gaze, you might ask? Well, let me tell you. I know this is very distracting, but I implore you to at least keep listening. It's when the author or the director focuses the attention on the male character, the hero, not because we're necessarily more interested in him and his development and his arc, but just because we like to look at him. And this, of course, happens in the novel genre, but it is so powerfully executed by these film adaptations that, I know, if you need to take a moment, please, I won't judge. I will respect, actually. Anyway, so it really, becomes this phenomenon when Colin Firth jumps into a pond as Mr. Darcy and walks out in a wet shirt. And this is going to this is going to continue on into the 21st century, but before we get there, I do want to I do want to take a moment to appreciate the time when my family and I went to Lime Park, which is where this was filmed, and this happened. Anyway, so we can now move on. Let us get back home. You've made it. You've made it back to the present day. You've made it back to the 21st century. You've survived. Okay. Anyway, so what these film adaptations do for Jane Austen is they make it so if you love Jane Austen, it now means that you love the film adaptations as well as, or even instead of the novels. What it does for the Regency genre as a whole, and I've touched on these already a little bit, is it does bring it more into the mainstream. It normalizes the female gaze in the period drama. It adds a lot of conventions to the period drama. It makes period dramas more popular. It makes them more successful. But it also creates this new pool of visual cues now. I mean, we know what the conventions of the Regency romance are in novel form, but on screen we're now able to explore what the Regency can look like, as well as what people say, and as well as they behave. For example, this happened in 2008 in a mini-series called Lost in Austen. The premise of this is the main character kind of switches place. She like blue-skidoos into Pride and Prejudice. It takes the place of Elizabeth Bennet. And there's a scene in it when Mr. Darcy walks out of a pond in a wet shirt. This is so weird because she's blue-skidooed into the novel. This doesn't happen in the novel though. But this becomes shorthand, for Jane Austen, for Darcy, for a really sexy, broody figure, And this happened very recently too, in Bridgerton. We can linger on this for a little bit longer if you'd like to as well. So as well as creating this new wealth of visual tropes to draw from, it also creates this culture. So with these period dramas, these adaptations, they become hyper-conscious, they become kind of meta in the way that they treat the genre, because they know they can pull from something like this, and everyone will go, oh yes, Jane Austen, oh yes, Colin Firth. But as well as really leaning into these tropes and these conventions, period dramas in recent years have been really good at intentionally breaking these conventions as well. Bridgerton, which I believe most of you have heard of, is really notable in a lot of ways, but one of these is in its, what the creator calls color-conscious casting, or just diverse casting. Of course, the actual Regency was more diverse than we think it was, racially and ethnically, but what it does here is it throws historical accuracy out the window and instead plays with the genre, the time period, as a fantasy world rather than a historical era that we need to cling really accurately to. I mean, they're saying, if you want to see people in period accurate dress, we have those. We have so many of those. Go watch Wives and Daughters. Go watch the 1995 Pride and Prejudice. This is something new. This is an expansion of the genre. And as well as big changes like this, Bridgerton also modernizes the Regency romance in the way that it dresses up its characters. They are in more modern materials, with more modern designs. Their makeup is more modern, their hair is more modern. So it takes, to varying degrees, it looks at what the genre is and it says, this is great, but let's spice it up a little bit more. Let's make it a little more appealing to modern audiences. Audiences who until this point haven't really been the period drama sort of audience. And this is just a part of a larger trend in recent period dramas where, again, they look at what we have, they say, we have enough of this, let's do something different, let's do something more representative, let's do something a little bit more, interesting, something we haven't seen before. And And with that, I want to go back to why the Regency. So, 130 years ago, Hugh Thompson brings the Regency and into the late Victorian era, creating this sort of hybrid. Just a couple of years ago, Bridgerton did the same thing. And I think that is such a huge reason why we keep coming back to the Regency. It's because it's able to give us all of the things that we want. We can look at people in pretty dresses, for sure, but we can also very easily, because it's this age on the brink of modernity, put modern sensibilities into it, and it doesn't seem to shake it too much. It's like putting the modern age into a Regency silhouette. And we've been doing this for years and years and years, whether it's Victorian, bless you, social commentary, whether it's Thompson's illustrations, whether it's our need to see Colin Firth in a wet shirt, whether it's our need to see, what's his name? The Anthony actor? Jonathan Bailey in a wet shirt, anyway. So yes, that is one of the main reasons, I think, why the Regency has this enduring appeal. Are there any questions? This has been a lot. These are the waters of Bath, by the way. Anyway, good. And again, if you do want to talk more, if you do have questions, or to come look at the books up here, we can do that after. So, also, if you are interested in some of the things that we've talked about, here are some resources for you to consult. Unfortunately, I don't think anyone has written a comprehensive history of the Regency romance, so you know what I'll be doing tomorrow. I also should put a plug in for this series. It's not a book, it's a mini-series by Her Majesty Lucy Worsley, who, again, I repeat, lipstick I am wearing, called A Very British Romance, and what it does is it goes from about 1740 with the publication of Pamela, Samuel Richardson's Pamela, and takes it to the 20th century, looking at how a lot of these conventions were established or how they evolved in fact and fiction. Anyone ever get a picture of this? Who wanted a picture of this? If not, too bad. We're moving on because we are now going to take a little sneak peek.
Coming soon to theaters.
And what we are doing next month, which is I actually have no idea. Sorry. And this is where you be so enormously helpful. We have some QR codes here. The one on the left is for our Facebook, one on the right is for Instagram. Follow us, make sure you keep tabs on what we're doing, discounts and things that we have. But the one in the center is a survey, which, if you would not mind, it would be so helpful for you to fill out. It will help us know what we could improve on, what kinds of things you want to see. But in context of what I just said, also give you the option to look at some different things that maybe you want to see for an event for the month of August, and we can figure out what the people want. We're here for the people. Unlike the Regency upper class. Some of these things include like book illustration, bookbinding, children's literature, the great American novel, curator's choice, so looking at just our favorite things at artifacts of history, also a presentation possibly by our art curator. I won't direct you to where she's sitting because I don't think she'd like that. But please, it would be so great if you could do that for us. Also, do we have the little slips around? Okay, where are they? Okay, cool. We've also got little slips for you to, just really little ones. It's just a little checkbox thing with 4 little checkboxes. That would help us know, again, how we can better these presentations and get a good feel for what sorts of things you want to see future events at Artifacts of History. Did everyone scan these things who wanted to? That should be everyone in the room. Good. Okay. And we can come back to this as well if some of you feel so moved to fill out the survey. And as we do this, As you do this, I want to turn the time over to our manager here at Artifacts, Julia, who will let you know what the remainder of the evening looks like.
Hello, I'm Julia. I'm the housekeeper here. Lady Fortington is such a kind mistress.
Oh, do go on.
Oh. And I'm just so thrilled that you're all here. So, Lady Fortington has asked me tonight to direct you to what activities we have prepared. We're very pleased to let you know that their kitchen has prepared some delights for your taste buds. And I will apologize for the hammering where the scullery maid thought she saw a mouse. And the whole kitchen was aroused. Yes. Yes,
But it wasn't a mouse. We are very clean.
We are very clean. The cat got it, pleased to say. But if you direct your attention to the back, just a nice little head swivel, if you are capable. We have a fan decorating station for those ladies that desire to take a fan with them as well. Black, if you desire that, or white, if you desire that. We have some lovely wax seal stamps for you to practice on, and we will have one of our lovely other staff to direct you in that regard. We have in this lovely corner an embroidery station, and one can never have too many hankies. When there is a plethora of gentlemen running down the street, one must have a plethora of hankies to put on their feet. That is what my mother always said. And so if you would like to get your name, or, I'm sorry, that's much too much, your initial embroidered onto a hanky, please greet the staff over at that corner. Again, I will direct your attention to the back over that way. There will be some delectable sandwiches and sweets and lemonade for you as well as a tea tasting to taste some delectable teas that have been inspired by some of the characters that you got to learn about today. And many of you walked through the parlor before you came in, and there will be some parlor games, charades and card games and such to really get the gusto gusting. So I ask, please, Lady Fortington.
Yes, know your place. Okay. There will also right here will be a little station for Kahoot of Can You Survive the Regency Romance? Not the Regency Romance, the Regency era. Okay, continue on.
Yes, lady. Thank you, lady. So, all I ask is that as you peruse the options that we have presented, that if a table is full, take a turn around the room, perhaps, and find a table that is less full, and then perhaps come back, and maybe that table will be more empty. And we do ask that, since you're all lovely ladies and gentlemen, please act like ladies and gentlemen. There will be no hussery and no extravagance.
Good. Also, the Kahoot can only take 10 people because I didn't pay for premium. Just so you know.
But we're not a poor household.
No, we must be economical.
Thrifty.
Yes.
Yes. These are trying times.
Indeed. Okay, great. So with that, let us have. If you're here for the poetry event, you might remember a little special friend who will help us transition into the next part of the evening, and that is. Wait for it. Jazzercise pair. Yeah. So again, Kahoot will be here. We've got the embroidery, the handkerchief embroidery, painting fans, wax seals, tea tasting, some light hors d'oeuvres, parlor games, and then if you want to come and look at the books, we have them here. There are some first edition Austens, by the way, which is also kind of cool. So you are free now to. Oh my goodness, yes, thank you, house girl. If you wouldn't mind just using the chairs that you're sitting at to place around the table, that would save us some hassle. Again, we're being very economical in this house. All right, thank you so much.